So without further ado, we'll get started here. As many of you might know, this webinar is part of the Community Energy Planning Getting to Implementation in Canada initiative. GTI, as we call it, is a national multi-year initiative, and it's being led in partnership by the Community Energy Association, Quest, and Sustainable Prosperity. Sustainable Prosperity, and Stephanie Cairns, who's on the line with us today, was the lead on the research that we're going to be focusing on today. Just want to mention that this project is also being funded by 9 foundations and organizations across Canada. The McConnell Foundation, Suncor Foundation, the Alberta Real Estate Foundation, the Real Estate Foundation of BC, and 4 organizations that are part of EcoWest. They're economic development organizations in Western Canada. This particular webinar is part of a long series of initiatives that are being undertaken as part of the GTI initiative. As you can see on the screen, there's a whole bunch of moving parts as part of this project, and you could read all about it on our website. It's www.gettingtoimplementation.ca. This particular piece was developed as part of our research stage, and as you can see, there's a number of other reports that I encourage you to take a look at. And at the end of the presentation, I will talk about next steps going forward for the rest of 2016. Now, before we move into the details of the findings of the community energy planning and the value proposition research, I do want to give everybody on the line a quick overview of what community energy planning is, and then I'll pass the presentation over to Stephanie Cairns, who's the Director of the Communities Program at Sustainable Prosperity, and she'll go over with you the findings from the Community Energy Planning, the Value Proposition Report. I'm then going to pass it over to Jim Andrais, who's the Program Manager for Environmental Policy at the City of Edmonton, and he's going to walk you through some of the great work being done in the City of Edmonton on the energy transition strategy. And we're going to end the webinar with a presentation by Derek Satnick, the Vice President of Technologies at S2E Technologies, and he's going to be speaking about his role advancing a net zero project in London, Ontario, and he'll cover some of the economic benefits that have arisen from the projects that he's worked on, and talk a little bit more about some ideas around how municipalities can facilitate more implementation of energy efficiency development. So I'm going to get right into it. So the chart that you see on the screen right now is a snapshot of how energy is used in Canadian communities. Now, one of the concerns or doubts that we often hear from cities or from we hear a lot in the media is, the question about how much impact a community can really make on a regional, provincial, or national scale when it comes to energy and emissions. And this chart, developed with data from Natural Resources Canada, shows that there is a very strong case for local action on energy and emissions. What we see here is that Canadian communities influence 50% of energy and 60% of greenhouse gas emissions. And those numbers are not insignificant. And on top of that, taken together with other pressures, cities are faced with the challenge that they've got to compete in the global economy. Across Canada, cities are dealing with changing demographics, mounting infrastructure costs and asset replacement costs, and budgetary constraints. And community energy plans are a tool that can help communities reconcile all of the challenges and demands coming from these various angles. So through this project, we've identified that 180 communities across Canada have developed community energy plans to address some of the challenges that I just spoke about. A community energy plan is a tool that can help communities define their priorities around energy with a view to driving economic development, with managing risks and enhancing resilience, with improving energy efficiency, and with cutting greenhouse gas emissions, among other things. It's usually led by local governments, but implemented with a broad range of community stakeholders like energy utilities, provincial government representatives, real estate developers, community organizations, and so on. They all look different. There's no two community energy plans that look the same, but we did find that there are typically many of similar components in a community energy plan. So often communities will start with a baseline inventory of energy and GHG emissions. They often set out to accomplish energy conservation and greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. They usually include models that project different energy usage scenarios, and then they usually set out to achieve a number of actions to achieve the targets they set out. And they cover a broad scope of actions, and everything from energy efficiency projects in existing and new buildings, transportation and land use projects, waste diversion and waste to energy, distributed energy resources, water conservation. Those are some of the most common actions that we see, but the list definitely extends beyond the scope that you see here. So I hope that that gives you a good synopsis of what exactly a community energy plan is. I should mention that we use the umbrella term community energy plan, but they're called a whole range of things. We hear community energy and emissions plan, community-wide climate action plans, community GHG emission plans. So typically they'll be named, they'll be called something different from province to province or from community to community, but at the end of the day, they all come set out to achieve the same things. So if you have any questions to clarify what exactly a community energy plan is, again, I encourage you to add it to the chat box. And with that said, I'm going to pass it along to Stephanie Cairns. So just very quickly, Stephanie, sorry, I just got a note saying that the slides are not advancing. Can folks see the slides on your screen? If you can't see the slides moving along, just send us a note in the chat box and we'll try and solve the issue. So I'm going to pass it along to Stephanie, who's going to talk about more about the research that we undertook, the community energy planning, the value proposition research. So Stephanie's worked with leading NGOs across Canada and think tanks in the field of sustainable development, energy and climate change, and she's done this for over 30 years. She works for Sustainable Prosperity now, and she serves on the board of several national environmental organizations. So she has a very long and impressive biography. I'm going to leave it there and pass it along to Stephanie to cover some of the research findings.
Super. Thank you so much, Sarah. Good morning, and thank you to everyone for joining our webinar. The Getting to Implementation initiative came to our team at Sustainable Prosperity about a little over a year ago with what seemed like a simple question. What is the value proposition of community energy planning? Is there evidence for positioning community energy planning not exclusively as an environmental initiative, but also as an economic development and social policy initiative? This seemed like a simple question when they first approached us, but investigating it proved more challenging than we expected. To begin with, only 1 in every 2 of the seats we examined included assessment of the cost effectiveness of their proposed programs, and only a handful had analyzed the direct and indirect economic impacts of seat implementation in their communities. The analyses which have been done rely on economic forecasting and therefore are of more use as a decision-making tool than as an assessment of actual impact. And finally, the studies which have been done have used widely different baselines, assumptions, and methodologies, and thus could not be directly compared. We therefore adopted a hybrid approach to our research, drawing on the findings of the 6 most comprehensive economic analyses that have been conducted of Canadian SEEP's actions and programs, and also experience from 16 specific communities across Canada. Our research was then tested at several community workshops and refined and adapted based on that feedback. However, given the very variable nature of energy use and supply opportunities in communities, I do need to emphasize that our findings are project and community specific and not directly or inherently transferable to every community. Nonetheless, what did we find from our research? A very clear story did emerge. Our findings revealed that community energy plans are invaluable tools for communities to strengthen their local economies, to reduce current and future energy costs and emissions, and to create jobs. And we also found, perhaps a bit more predictably, that implementation of a community energy plan can also help a community achieve its environmental and community health goals. A key finding from an economic perspective is that energy spending across both public and private consumers adds up to very significant levels in Canadian communities. It ranges from $2,000 to $4,000 per capita per year. So for a small community of 5,000, that adds up to $10 to $20 million a year. And our biggest cities are easily spending several billions of dollars every year on the costs of heating, cooling, power, mobility, and industrial processing. Another compelling finding from a local economy perspective is that little of this energy spending stays in the community. Take this analysis from the City of London, Ontario, which has a population of around 370,000. London spent $1.6 billion on energy in 2014, on gasoline, natural gas, electricity, diesel, etc. And of this amount, only 12% stayed in the local economy, and only 59% stayed in the province. The dollars staying in the London economy varied according to fuel type. Now, of course, this profile will vary widely between communities, but common to all communities is that the opportunity to keep energy dollars local and circulating within the local economy can be enhanced through the energy efficiency and local generation initiatives that are found in community energy plans. For example, district energy or combined heat and power. Staying with the London example, economic analysis of community energy spending in a business as usual scenario has the London community spending just over $1.9 billion on energy by 2018. But by reducing energy use of London residents and businesses by even 1%, London would keep about $14 million a year from leaving the local economy. Implementing the full suite of actions in their community energy plan is predicted to reduce energy costs by about 1/8, avoiding around $250 million a year in energy costs by 2018. The value to residents and businesses is compelling when the net present value of savings such as these is calculated over time spans of 10 or 20 years. The SEEPs we reviewed used a wide range of economic analysis approaches to assess the economic costs, benefits, and broader effects of implementation. Some looked at economic cost benefits of specific actions and payback periods. Some include a shadow price for carbon. Some develop marginal abatement cost curves for greenhouse gas emission reduction actions. Others model economy-wide impacts, including direct, indirect, and induced impacts over long-term horizons. Some are also monetizing co-benefits such as reduced congestion, improved air quality, and improved population health. Our report lists the approaches that we found in Canada and cites findings from the analyses which have been done. But surprisingly, few communities have conducted a cost-benefit analysis of their full SEEP implementation or assessed the direct and indirect economic impacts of implementation, i.e. gone beyond the cost savings assessment. Edmonton has done one of the most thorough analyses, and Jim will be discussing that experience later in the webinar. The Municipality of North Cowichan in BC provides an interesting example of a very thorough analysis done for a small community and is also featured in our report. However, what we did find is that where SEEPs do contain economic analyses, they have consistently found a strong value proposition for SEEP implementation, impressive community savings, solid returns on investment, and attractive local job creation. Now, what are the other elements of the value proposition? Sarah, could you just go back to the previous slide, please? Thanks. Is the case for SEEP strictly around climate and energy savings? What other benefits have been identified when we look at communities where SEEPs have started to be implemented? So turning now to our findings from the ex-post experience, the actual implementation experience in 16 additional Canadian communities, we found a range of examples demonstrating that there is also a strong value proposition around community priorities such as energy affordability, a key consideration particularly for low and fixed income residents, but also for businesses, local economic development, creating and supporting vibrant and energy resilient communities, and community health benefits. Let's look first at energy affordability. This is a key consideration particularly for low and fixed income residents and also for businesses. Energy costs can impose a significant burden on low and fixed income households, and at the same time affordable rental housing can be among the least energy efficient buildings in a city. In Toronto, for example, by 2020, roughly 60% of rental apartments will be over 50 years old. Housing affordability can be supported through energy efficiency retrofits or by building energy efficiency into new housing stock, thus making housing more affordable and reducing energy poverty. The City of St. John's, for example, in their affordable housing business plan, is testing new approaches to improving energy efficiency for low-income homes. The program's goal is to reduce energy costs by 30% to promote long-term housing affordability. The plan promotes energy efficiency measures in both rental and ownership housing. But affordable energy is also important to businesses, particularly to businesses for whom energy constitutes a relatively large share of production inputs. In fact, 87% of Canadian business executives identify improving energy efficiency as a high or moderate priority for their businesses. District energy systems can contribute to lowered operating costs for local businesses. Some estimates reveal that businesses or owners of buildings connected to district energy can achieve savings of nearly $3 per square foot a year on their utility costs. Another interesting example comes from Guelph, Ontario, where rising energy costs were placing pressure on the Polycon Industries car parts plant to close. Working with the provincial utility and with the city's community energy plan, Polycon installed a combined heat and power system that has saved the plant $2 million per year in energy costs. And this is what allowed it to stay in the community of Guelph instead of relocating outside of the country. Finally, a third dimension of energy affordability comes from integrating land use and transportation. This can reduce transport-related energy costs for individuals and businesses, as well as reducing increasingly significant congestion-related loss of personal and business productivity. A study conducted, for example, by Toronto's Metrolinx concluded that even by 2006, and probably much more significant now, the annual cost of congestion to commuters in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area was already $3.3 billion. This cost comes from travel delays, increased impact to the environment, increased vehicle costs from travel delays, and increased chances of vehicle collisions. So integrating land use and transportation can increase affordability not only for individuals but also for businesses. A next major theme that we found is that SEEPs can induce local economic development. There are direct jobs created in retrofitting homes and buildings and in installing green energy projects, and also the professional services to support these projects. There are also the indirect jobs created in the manufacturing of the products used, in research and in innovation, and finally the induced spending as a result of residents having higher disposable incomes when their energy costs are lower, and businesses having reduced operating expenses. Communities that can provide clean, affordable, and reliable energy are also well positioned to attract new investment from certain types of information, manufacturing, and industrial businesses. Indeed, clean, affordable, and reliable power is of primary importance for businesses such as data centers. They are large energy users. They can incur large costs from power interruptions, and in many cases they have corporate commitments on greenhouse gas emissions. IBM, for example, moved their entire corporate headquarters and labs to Markham, Ontario, a move credited to the development of a local district energy system that provides clean, reliable, and affordable energy from multiple sources. We found similar examples in Kelowna, BC, as one example of the community's access to clean, affordable, and stable energy being a draw to access large data centers. In addition, creating more energy efficient spaces and buildings in communities adds value to projects that extend well beyond energy cost savings. These values include things such as increased sale prices for properties, increased rents, and increased attractiveness for institutional investors. In fact, energy efficiency is being used as a proxy by many institutional investors in deciding whether to invest. Finally, energy efficiency workplaces appear to boost employee productivity and reduce absenteeism. When Manitoba Hydro opened a new LEED Platinum Winnipeg head office while keeping their former headquarters occupied, they were in the unusual position of being able to compare employee absenteeism between these two buildings, their former headquarters and the new LEED facility. What they found was that the 2,000 employees in their new building had fewer absentee days, an amount equal to 3,000 extra days of work per year, or roughly a 1% boost to productivity. In the case of Manitoba Hydro, this corresponded to a labor cost gain of approximately $700,000 a year. In fact, that was more than twice the roughly $300,000 in energy savings achieved from the bill improved energy efficiency. So there's clearly broader economic values to SEEP implementation. In addition, SEEPs can also support vibrant and resilient communities. Smarter energy management is increasingly a component of major neighborhood redevelopment and renewal projects. A major redevelopment presents a unique opportunity to piggyback the installation of smarter energy systems, such as improved public transit, active transportation infrastructure, improved building design, improved integration between land use and transportation, and distributed energy resources. For example, in Regent Park in Toronto, the revitalization plan has included a community energy system connecting all buildings in the redevelopment to provide a share of their required heating and cooling. In addition to greenhouse gas benefits, this approach is estimated to have led to a 15% savings in energy costs. Energy resilience is another increasingly critical factor for communities across Canada, both remote communities and interconnected communities. In remote communities, 6 provincial governments have recently established a pan-Canadian task force to reduce the use of diesel to produce electricity in remote communities. Access to cleaner and more economic energy solutions is the key driver here, and SEEPs are a made-to-measure approach for identifying these solutions. But resilient energy systems are also important in on-grid communities. Increasing extreme weather events call for greater local energy options. Combined heat and power systems are providing critical standby power services in the event of major power interruptions, such as those in Calgary's 2013 flood, or the Ontario ice storm that same year, which left millions without power for days and days in winter weather. So SEEPs can support resilience and energy resilience as well. Finally, moving to some of the other co-benefits, we find that SEEPs can help to achieve health goals. Health benefits can arise as a result of opportunities for active transportation, cycling, pedestrian activities, and systems. And also health benefits can arise as a result of the improved air quality from reduced vehicle kilometers in urban centers. As an example, an evaluation of various scenarios for expanding light rail and bus rapid transit in Waterloo, Ontario, found that the project could lead to air quality improvements that could prevent from 31 to 61 hospital admissions and reduce healthcare costs by $8.7 million to $16.6 million over 30 years. And lastly, SEEPs are an important tool for mitigating financial risks. They can buffer communities from uncertainty over evolving carbon pricing and policies, and they can also reduce the risks from fluctuating energy prices. Both of these can have significant impacts on the cost of energy in local economies. In conclusion, our research found that the value proposition for SEEPs includes energy are not exportable costs. And I think that if we look at some of the larger economic strategies that we're trying to implement, in provinces such as Ontario, in provinces such as BC, at the federal level as well, the whole connection between what we're trying to do at the community level on energy planning and what we're trying to do with clean technology strategy and developing Canadian capacity on clean technology is very interlinked, but none of these are short-term approaches.
Thanks, Stephanie. Just moving through the questions. Okay. The next question is there any funding available in Ontario for municipalities to develop community energy plans? I'm happy to answer that if that would be helpful.
Ahead, Sarah.
Sure. So the Ontario Ministry of Energy does have a Municipal Energy Plan program, and the IESO is administering an Aboriginal Community Energy Plan program where they are supporting, financially supporting communities to develop community energy plans. So yes, there is funding, and for those who might be curious about other provinces and territories across Canada, there's various kind of funding opportunities available, and we also have developed a national report on policies supporting community energy plan implementation, and we've got a full list of the policies, legislation, and programs posted up on our website if you're curious to take a look. Seeing another question here. So you noted that only 12% of London's energy expenditures remain in the community. Do we know what the overall rate for community capture, sorry, I'm scrolling, the overall rate for community capture of expenditures is?
As a national average, I assume the question is. No, we don't know that. And in fact, one of the real challenges that we faced in doing our analysis is that, originally we thought we might be able to come in and do kind of an integrated economic quantitative analysis, and because communities are developing their economic energy profiles, there's no standardization of the approach. It really wasn't possible for us to do any kind of a roll-up, which is what we had hoped to do, and therefore we went to this more case-by-case reporting model.
Thanks, Stephanie. So I don't see any other questions at the moment in the question box, so I think what we'll do for now is move on, and if anything else comes to mind, please share your questions with us. Thanks again, Stephanie, for your presentation. Again, very informative. Next is speaking is Jim Andrais, the Program Manager for Environmental Policy at UC of Edmonton. Jim has led much of the work associated with Edmonton's energy transition strategy, which was passed unanimously by Council last year. Jim is a CMA, has more than 30 years of experience in municipal government, including 12 years as the city's audit manager, 9 years as an advisor in the mayor's office, and spent the past 12 developing environmental policies and programs. So he's currently leading, as I mentioned, the implementation of Edmonton's Energy Transition Plan, a community plan that is designed to reduce Edmonton's greenhouse gas, reduce Edmonton's dependency on fossil fuels, and ensure Edmonton's energy systems are resilient to the forces of climate change. So with that said, I will pass it along to Jim to speak more about this.
Okay, thanks, Sarah, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone out there. Thanks for joining in. I've got about 10 minutes, and I'm going to keep my eye on the clock, so I'll jump into this very quickly. And what I'm going to do is give you an update on Edmonton's community energy transition strategy, and the focus is going to be on phase 1 of implementation that we've just wrapped up or just wrapping up, and maybe a few words on phase 2 that we're into as well. Next slide, Sarah. Quite simply, our transition strategy, our community energy strategy, we frame it as a risk management strategy. It's designed to preserve Edmonton's quality of life by addressing major energy and climate risks. So the key theme there, and it's probably the same in your communities, this is about people. This is about quality of life of people, and it's about a risk that is coming at us externally from the environment in the form of climate risks and energy risks. Next slide. The targets that we've adopted for this strategy are very modest, and intentionally they're modest, they're doable, but most importantly they're scalable. When we took our strategy to City Council last year, we wanted to be conservative, and so you'll see that again, these aren't the most ambitious standards you see on the planet. They're good standards. They'll put us on a low-carbon path, 35% reduction in GHG emissions by 2035 from 2005 levels, 25% reduction in energy use per person, and 10% of energy is electricity generated locally. Next slide. The phased approach that we're taking, it's phase one, which were largely completed. There's a bit of overlap with phase 1 and 2, but has been establishing a framework for success, a governance framework and a management framework. And when we looked back on our experience over the last decade in this field, and we said, well, what do we have to do different? What do we have to improve on? And governance and management were two areas that were at the top of the list. There were others, not enough time to get into all of those today, but really important foundational pieces that we've been working on in phase 1. Phase 2 is a 3-year period that started last year. It's really 2016, 17, 18, and it's doing a lot of stuff. I'll get into it in a second, some of them, that will prepare us for community scale programs, which is phase 3. Eventually, if we're going to get on the low carbon path, we believe that we have to get to community scale programs that are going to move the needle in a big way, a much bigger way than we have in the past. And so phase 2 is about doing a variety of things, from continuing to learn to piloting to a variety of things that will get us to a point in 2019 where we are able to launch community scale programs. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about phase 1 and the things that we've been doing over the past year in terms of establishing a governance and management framework. We took our strategy to City Council last year at about this time, and it was different than some of the other plans we've taken in the past. Plans of the past usually were very aspirational. They had a lot of principles and soft stuff in them, but they didn't have the rubber hitting the road action plan and the modeling and the analysis to support the action plan. And so that's what we took to City Council. 2 half-day sessions were spent with City Council last March and April. They evaluated our risk assessment. They looked at the principles of the strategy. They looked at the 8-year plan. And the thing I think that really convinced them in the end that this was something that they liked and supported was the value proposition. As Stephanie was referring to, we had some really outstanding modeling that was done for us by Dr. Richard Boyd and others that really helped to quantify the business case for moving forward. And in the end, that business case showed some big numbers, and even though there was a cost side to it, there was a benefit side to it that was even more compelling, and it made it easier to swallow the costs that were associated with any investment. This being, just a series of very good investments, and that's how it was presented. Also, the comprehensive 8-year action plan was something that appealed to Council in that strategy. Why 8 years? Why go out that far? Well, I think that's something we learned as well, is that eventually we're moving into a more regulated strategy as we see it, and we want to signal that to the community. You can't do that very well with a 1 or 2 or 3 year action plan. With an 8-year plan, and even a 12-year plan, I would argue, you have an opportunity to engage the community years in advance with the type of change that's being anticipated, and being totally transparent about that. So that was a very good thing that helped as well. And then also the fact that it was unanimously approved had a lot to do with a very green city council, very climate change literate, very conscious about the risks that were coming at us and coming at the planet. And so again, it was a perfect storm for us to get unanimous approval to move forward. City Council recognized that plans, in your community too, they have a best before date. They have a shelf life that's maybe a decade, and then they seem to become obsolete and drift away. Council said, we don't want that to happen. We understand that this is a multi-decade effort, and we want to entrench this strategy in a city policy. And so they gave us marching orders, come back with a new city policy, C585. In the past, when we've been in this situation, coming forward with plans, we didn't come forward and say, hey, by the way, there's a price tag on this plan, and we need a budget, and without it, we're not going to go very far, very fast. This time, we were very clear about that, and even though the strategy was approved in March and April, reviewed by Council, it took until November during our regular budget review process for City Council to actually consider our new service packages for this, and this is for the phase 2 work, getting ready for community scale programs, and they approved 2 service packages, one that had a community focus, one that had an internal city operations focus, and the dollars over those three years are about $12 million new dollars coming at us in addition to our previous budget. So that was a strong statement of commitment from City Council. Another thing that we did that isn't unique, I know it's out there in some communities, was to create a committee of City Council with a bylaw, with all of the authority vested in it that comes from the Municipal Government Act to oversee our efforts. And it's our Energy Transition City Council Advisory Committee, long name. We advertised for very serious high-level community leaders to be members of this committee, people with a passion for energy transition, people who have a sense of the solution and a vision for the future. And so we advertised for that. That closed at the end of January, and just last week City Council finished the interview process for these people. We still do not know who. It's a confidential council mayor and executive committee process, so we should know who those committee members are within a few days. And so we're very excited, because not only will these people be holding our feet to the fire in terms of achieving this strategy, something that didn't exist in that very tangible way before, but they will also be wearing the leadership hat. We will be looking for these people to be the voice, the face of energy transition in Edmonton, to be leveraging their significant networks and taking the message and you know, taking this from an effort that starts in City Hall and translates out to 1 million Edmontonians. We've also created an administrative advisory committee. These are experts. These are people who will be helping us with more of the nitty-gritty of the different projects in the 8-year action plan. And I didn't mention there's about 150 of those actions in the plan, and they will be taking, these will not be maybe the senior high-level community leaders that are on the council advisory committee, but they will be really outstanding experts from industry, from academia, from all those places that need to be involved in this strategy. We're right in the process of increasing our team. We need more people. We need more project managers to handle the 150 tactics that are in our strategy. So we're in the final stages of recruiting a number of new staff and new project managers, and also people with expertise in marketing. And last on this list is a corporate sustainability officer, and this is really an exciting new position that we argued for in the strategy that will have a corporate focus. It will have a corporate mandate, City of Edmonton operations, to build that sustainability lens so that decisions that are being made across the corporation are examined through that lens, which will include social, economic, and environmental criteria. Next slide. I'm going to just zip through because I'm out of time in 1 minute here. And I'll just say that in phase 2, which is the phase that we're in right now, is the type of projects that are going on. We are really elevating our marketing and communication program. Council has given us significant dollars to do that. We need to be talking with and engaging 1 million Edmontonians. Demonstration programs, could talk all day about that. We need to up the ante on that as well. An energy efficiency information tool. What's that all about? Well, if I had half an hour, I'd tell you, but next slide. Lots of things happening in energy use in buildings, projects that are underway. We're updating our own city policy for city buildings, really raising the bar. City needs to lead by example. There's going to be, by the end of this year, pilot programs on residential building labeling programs, energy reporting and disclosure programs for large buildings, and within a couple of years we need to have a retrofit program to pilot and to roll out at a community scale for residential and large buildings as well. Next slide. Lots of things happening in generation, including we have a really interesting district energy project that is right at the make or break point that's happening in Edmonton right now, and I'm certain it will be a make. We, at the same time, district energy opportunities go beyond just downtown. We're about to, in 2016, commence a citywide feasibility evaluation of district energy, integrated energy solutions. I think the scope will need to be bigger than it started out district, but I think it'll probably be an integrated energy study opportunities in that area. Things in industry, next slide. Projects happening around land use, transportation, development. Won't get into those, but you can just sort of glance at them yourself and get a sense of what those are about. Next slide. And in city operations, again, the message to us back in the early days of developing this strategy is if the city is going to have any credibility in leading this community effort, you're going to have to raise the bar in your own operations. And so, again, we have, in the 8-year action plan, you'll see probably a third of the tactics, of the 150 tactics, relate to things that we need to do better in city operations. Next slide. I think I'm done, Sarah. Done. 2 minutes over. 3 minutes.
Thanks so much,
Back
Jim.
to you, Sarah.
That was
Okay.
great. There was one question that came in that's relevant to the presentation you just gave, so I'm going to ask it quickly, and then we're going to move on, and then I think we'll come back to some of the other questions that were asked at the very end of the webinar. So there's one question here from Emily Miranda. She's a planning consultant with MMM Group. She used to work in Edmonton, and now she's in Quebec, and she is wondering how Edmonton is planning on enforcing the goals in the energy transition strategy to ensure that they're going to be achieved. One example she asked is, will bylaws be in place to help ensure that the goals will be achieved?
Well, yeah, I think that when we were selling this strategy to City Council, we told City Council loud and clear that what we're trying to do is make the market move faster than it wants to move. That's what this is all about. And so we need to do the things that you're familiar with, like education and awareness. We need to help the industry to build capacity. Then we need to have incentives for a period of time, not forever, to normalize, to de-risk, to make these, to demonstrate the value of these solutions. And then City Council, you need to be prepared to invest in regulations. Regulations will be the natural transition from the incentive phase to that mature situation that we're eventually striving for. So every one of, there's many places in here where the solution will require regulations in the end. City Council understands that. We were totally transparent with them about that, and it's not a forever sort of proposition. We have to move very quickly through this market transformation stage to get to regulations that the community understands and supports and likes, and but it's not overnight, but it's not forever either.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for your presentation, and I think everyone on the line will agree that Edmonton serves as such a great example of a way to frame community energy planning as a way to manage risks in the community. And it sounds like you've made a lot of great advancements on institutionalizing the plan, so to speak, and a lot of the different efforts that you've undertaken. So thanks again for taking the time to present.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to move on to our final speaker, Derek Satnick, who is the Vice President of Technologies responsible for smart communities at S2E Technologies. He's going to, I mentioned earlier, Derek is going to talk about his work, his on-the-ground implementation work, working with energy efficiency projects, and more specifically a net zero project in London, Ontario. So without further ado, I will pass it along to Derek to walk through some of the work that he's done.
Thank you, Sarah, for introducing me. Can you hear me okay?
You can, yes.
Okay. So if you wouldn't mind flipping to the next slide. I've got the joy today of trying to connect some dots and trying to be the practical guy that shows what this can look like on the ground when it's all put together. So hopefully by the time I'm done talking, that will be the impression that you all have. The next slide, my third slide, shows the key projects that we're talking about. Some of the formatting's off, so I'll apologize for that, but that's okay. The content's all here. So this is the project. Some of you may have heard of this project already. We've been blessed with lots of media attention across Canada on this project. It's called West 5. It is a 70-acre mixed-use site. It's got about 350,000 square feet of commercial uses and about 1,700 homes. Construction windows, as you see on the slide there, we've started already. Right now we are building the first block of townhomes, and we are building the developer's new head office, which is just under the word sustainable on this slide. It's under the N. You can see the outline on the awkward-shaped blue building there. We've had lots of creative discussions around how you do community energy planning on this scale. This is not city scale, but it's obviously broad enough to have a whole bunch of complementary uses. And we started this whole project talking about what a smart community might be, what an integrated community might be. How do you take a word like sustainable and make it something a builder developer is actually driving and excited about and able to afford and wanting to use? So hopefully by the time I get through the next few slides, you'll have some ideas for that. So the next slide, please. When we started talking about what smart or sustainable or net zero means, the header on this slide had the word smart in it. We did a whole pile of research across most of the world's major developments and pulled ideas from all of those. These are pictures from North American projects, but they epitomize a bunch of the ideas that come up in this discussion about what smart or sustainable should be. And you can guess what a lot of it starts with. Net zero energy came up a lot, and that's the one that we are the most passionate about. Net zero water came up. Right in the upper middle of this slide, you can see a greenhouse on an industrial warehouse. And the idea there was better uses of land, better coordinated uses, and bylaws and zoning that permit that, and then all the technology required to make it work. That particular greenhouse is on a roof in Montreal, where you get a lot more winter than most of the rest of the places that we have urban places. So it's very doable, and they made strong financial returns within 2 years with that greenhouse. So some of the ideas that we're trying to promote in our thinking is that this stuff really does work. Really the issue that we see is integrating it and doing it right. So we've got ideas like swales on the left. Can you take parking and drain them into a place where water is actually used instead of just trying to figure out how to stockpile it or ship it somewhere? And then when people talk about smart, you get into things like USB chargers in the wall down towards the bottom right. So there's a whole variety of stuff that comes up in this discussion, but all of it ultimately is going to come back down to what a home buyer will pay for or what a commercial tenant is willing to absorb in their lease. So we spent probably more effort on finance and financial models than we did on almost any other thing. And we're proud to say that it's working. And so next slide or the slide after, I'll give you some numbers. You can advance the slide now, please, Sarah, if you don't mind. The numbers that we ran into vary, and they vary across a range of topics. There are diverse benefits, and there are strong returns for each of those benefits, but they are diverse. You have to think about them differently, obviously. And they all come into context. So when we talk about a community energy plan or things that a municipality can do, usually we're talking about creating the right context. And then when the right context exists and the right support is there, we can be creative and we can do some good things. You see the numbers on the right of this slide. When we talk about efficiency measures, we always get strong returns. We talk about generation measures on this site. It's primarily solar. Combined heat and power would have worked as well, but we prefer solar, so we did that. And we may use some combined heat and power yet, but the numbers for that will vary depending on how many loads we actually attach to it. And the buildings that we're designing are using substantially less than most buildings. So we actually ran into a problem with the returns on district energy because we've got so little energy going back and forth in the heating loops that it really does challenge the economics of the whole thing. But everybody's used to electrical district energy, whether they call it that or not. Our microgrid concept is very much a district. So this community is almost entirely electrically powered for heating and everything, and most of that from solar. And the returns are as you see there, so it's working. We're only building a handful of the buildings yet, so we'll be watching this actively, obviously, as we go. The reason that it's working is because we've adopted a micro-utility model, and the reason for that is this idea of upfront capital being a barrier. One of the biggest challenges always is coming up with money to pay for these things. So we have come to the place where the returns are so strong that either we can afford to invest upfront and get good returns, or if we don't want to invest upfront for whatever reason, and there are some good reasons, then we can externalize that cost entirely and get our micro-utility to fund it. And then the micro-utility will make those returns instead. And the economic benefit realized by the building occupant will be long-term stable energy pricing at a competitive rate today. And it just stays increasingly competitive with time. And then some of the biggest benefits you get are things like resilience through that word durability on the bottom left of the slide. Having a different approach to the way the system is designed, you really come out with a much better approach overall. Now, I'm not going to talk about transportation just for the sake of time, but there are comments here about electric vehicles as well. So I'll leave it at that. I think it speaks for itself. So next slide, please. The municipal role is really, I think, the reason we're here today. There are things that municipalities can do to make these projects possible. And then there are other things that municipalities wish they could do and can't, and we'll just accept those as true. The biggest thing municipalities can do is have supportive policies and get themselves coordinated. One of the first and greatest challenges we run into as a company that works with developers very closely, planning departments often are really good at having fantastic plans that the building permitting team can't give a permit to and doesn't know what to do with it and doesn't know how to integrate it. And when we start talking about things like district energy and we have to put a pipe somewhere, you run into questions like who owns the sidewalk and where allowed actually to put that pipe. Is it not allowed on city land or is it allowed on city land? And you get into the fine print on these topics very quickly. So one thing we've found is that having a sufficiently broad scope in your community energy plan that will allow you to address these topics is very helpful. You'll never solve them all in the first pass, but just identifying them is a great start. The Edmonton plan was impressive to me because it's so inherently practical and it just has so many different facets that are driven by practical thoughts. So then the next step is to coordinate everyone, find common topics, get people working together. And under these various topics, some of the quick ones we identified were things like salt-free roads or different ways to handle stormwater management, district energy again, or distributed energy versus grid constraints. There's this whole mix of topics where really there's a lot of people involved and you have to have them all talking in order to actually make any real progress. So we found the pilot project approach very freeing. And one of the things that we've realized, I don't know if everyone's experience would be the same on this, but certainly our experience has been that you can get away with a lot more if you say you're only going to do it once and you're going to treat it as a pilot study, learn from it, identify your policy challenges, go back and fix your grander policies so that they allow that kind of good idea to happen in the future. But by calling it a pilot, you reduce the risk for everyone and you make sure that everyone understands this is an experiment, and it gives you some freedoms to be able to learn the lessons that are needed before you make commitments to the broader industry. So next slide, please. I think most community energy plans really need to have a pilot phase and some pilot projects in order to get any teeth. So some of the things that we are using, the tools that we are using, lots of technology, lots of partners, some creative business models, and some creative marketing is probably the quick way that I would summarize that. And all of that fits in different ways with community energy planning. So one of the first partners that we went and approached was the city, and then the second was the utility. And of course, we are the technology partner in this project, so we were able to bring all the technology to the table and show people what it would look like and how it would work. And we found that the city was pretty engaging with that and was very supportive, but obviously it helps that they had the chance to see it before we started building it. The bullet points on the right of the slide are each in and of themselves very long topics, so I'm going to just poke those. And for those who are here listening right now, when Jim started sharing about Edmonton, he poked a bunch of things I'd love to ask questions about. Take some notes and ask some questions. We're holding some good time for questions at the end. But one of the hints that I wanted to drop, the DC Respect or Relief comment on the right here, is that, for example, when we did our water designs, according to bylaws and other best practices in industry, there's a certain way that we had to design the system, and it was not the best way. So we designed the system the way we had to, but then we also designed it the best way, and we were able to show that at about a third of the cost, we could achieve all the same stormwater management and better. But we were required to build both systems regardless. So this is where the pilot can be helpful. If we wanted to do something better, it would be a fully redundant secondary system. And that's where it starts to become hugely cost prohibitive for obvious reasons. So if there's opportunities that we can partner and create some kind of gain and benefit for the city through the pilot, and then receive some kind of respect or relief in the fees because of that as well, because the city service is not going to be used when we're done. So this kind of thinking, can we have open discussion about how we're making life easier for the city, and therefore can the city turn that around in some kind of relief to make it easier for the developer to go do these things. So I'll leave it at that. The next couple of slides are because we're handing the slides out after the webinar. So there's some information there about what S2E is and does, and then my second last slide is the web links to the community, west5.ca, and the last slide is my contact information. So I will leave it at that, and we can move back over to questions. Thanks very much, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Derek. So I'm going to open the question box here and just work through some of the questions that were sent through. I'm going to go back to one that was asked earlier by Judith Lip-Patrick. So the question is, it's worth noting that the retention of financial benefits at the local level depends on who is doing the work and who is financing the work. Have you looked at all of the role of community ownership of energy systems and projects like renewable energy systems or district energy systems? And then there's a comment, community energy or community power involves raising community finance to ensure community members are making financial returns as well as the social and environmental benefits. I'm wondering if you've examined this at all.
I'm sure we could all talk to that one. Maybe I'll jump in first.
Okay.
Speaking with several hats on at once, when I go in with a developer, they're not used to sharing, typically. And if the partner at the table is the utility, they're not used to sharing either. So one of the biggest victories that we've had is being able to get them to at least share with each other when we're talking about a micro utility model. And often we will come in and be we'll come in approaching business models that show the three of us as joint shareholders, where there's a technology partner, there's a utility partner, and there's a development partner. And the development partner could just as easily be replaced with a community development partner or with a condo corporation or any number of other business ventures. That the reality is that these projects will depend on the sites they're built on and on who the players are that are enabling them to be built there. So if a certain group of people owns a plot of land and that plot of land turns into a smart community project, then for my purposes, the project's going to be driven by whoever the owner of the land is and frankly, how much they do or don't want to share. When you get in at the city level and the community energy plan, then you've got a number of other opportunities that are all worth considering, and I would say should be considered and should be integrated. So maybe I'll pass over to Jim and others here.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Jim or Stephanie, is there anything you want to add?
Stephanie, why don't you go? You've probably got lots to say.
Well, I think financing is one of the really interesting dimensions here, and particularly because certainly one of the key issues that needs to be resolved in order to optimize the potential of community energy planning is how do you manage some of the split incentives that are in place. You know, we're talking about, for instance, the Edmonton plan, if you look at their economic analysis, looks at, you know, both public and private benefits that arise from what is essentially a public investment. And it requires us to really think differently about, you know, how we allocate costs and benefits in a community, but also how we actually finance some of the projects. So what we've seen in a lot of projects is a type of creative approach, new business models emerging. I think we just had an interesting example raised by Derek. We've seen examples of these micro-utilities in a lot of projects across the country. If you look at communities like Toronto, they have gone to innovative approaches to community finance, for instance, around some of their wind development that they're trying to do. And I guess the question is really to go back to the municipalities, if this is seen as an economic development opportunity, not only an environmental initiative, how do we think at the community level about integrating that dimension into the community plan?
I'll just build on that with an interesting development in Edmonton just in the last month. We've, like most municipalities, reorganization is something that we're all familiar with, and it happens every couple of years or every decade. We went through a really major one in the last few months, and what has happened is our group, which originally was considered an environmental group and now it has this large energy transition mandate, we have been put into a nice little branch. It includes economic development and environment, and I don't know any other municipalities where this exists, but whoever decided that at the highest corporate levels, you know, I think it's brilliant, because there are energy transition projects. They all have economic development implications, and as we transition from fossil fuel economies to clean energy, I mean, it's as much about economic development and economic opportunities as it is about climate and health and all these things. So we have this wonderful marriage, and so we're really quite excited about it.
Thanks so much for answering that. We have a couple questions in from Tony Chow. So one about utilities and one about developers. I'm going to start with utilities. So Tony's asking, what is the role of the utilities in the community energy plan? Their revenue is based on distribution of electricity, yet community energy plans intend to reduce consumption. Would any of the panelists like to tackle that one?
Well, I'll engage. I mean, certainly in a number of provinces, utilities have very strong requirements for demand-side management. You know, we have that in British Columbia, we have that in Ontario, and the whole community energy plan is really a very good strategy to meet those requirements. In British Columbia, in fact, what we're seeing is BC Hydro has played a major role in supporting communities to develop their community energy and emissions plans. The other aspect is a bit different, which is that there may be some competition between different types of utilities. In some cases, you know, natural gas utilities have an interest, in fact, in supporting shift towards more natural gas use, energy use that may take communities towards more consumption of their specific product, and in addition reduce their environmental footprint. So it's a complex situation, but in fact utilities do have an interest in this as well. Thanks,
Stephanie.
Derek,
Does
I'll
anyone
jump
want
in
to add
briefly.
anything? Okay.
Yeah, I suspect there's probably a couple utility voices on the phone, and that may be where the question came from, and that would be fabulous. The utility role is a little bit clumsy in this one because they're so heavily regulated, and internally within their culture, there's often very proactive intentions and very limited ability to act on those. So what we found, for my part at least, working in the development world, there are regulated and unregulated arms with most utilities in Ontario. I'm not sure how consistent that is across Canada. My understanding is that there's pockets where that's true and pockets where it's not. But it's really common across the more developed regions in Ontario. And the non-regulated portion of the utility presents some really interesting opportunities to talk about different business models. And maybe further beyond that, the utility is always owned by someone. Often the shareholder is the municipality. They or another shareholder behind the utility also has the opportunity to strike up a special purpose vehicle, a public-private partnership, or any number of other interesting things that can work collaboratively with the utility to respect but sort of work around some of the regulations that would otherwise limit their creativity. The catch is ultimately at some point you're going to have to tie to the regulations that do limit the utility. So if you don't fully island the community, then you're going to at some point have some kind of umbilical connection that is regulated. So we found lots of creative ways to work around that, but the biggest one has been that the utility has to be part of the discussion from the beginning. So I would suggest that really if there's a key role for the utility, one is to bring data. They're the only ones that can keep the data, so they need to bring their data. And when the city or other partners are working on the energy plan, the utility is a huge data resource for that. And then second is to bring infrastructure. They're the ones who are the keepers of the wires and the transformers and the pipes and the whatever else. And if they to the table with their experience and perspective on that, up to and including some basic business experience on how to do collections and get people to actually pay their bills. All of that is valued in terms of what they can bring together as a partner. And then they have to just bring some respect that there are going to be other partners needed. And as long as they're able to work with those other partners, be they somebody in the development industry, be they community members in a co-op, be they the city itself, there's lots of different structures, but when everybody brings their respective values, you're all stronger together. So I would say that's the key role the utility needs to bring to the table is their data and their infrastructure experience.
And this is Jim. I'd agree with Derek's comments on that. In Alberta situation, I think the utilities have not, they don't have the same demand side management mandates that are common in other jurisdictions around North America, and it's interesting to work with them to see how this is going to evolve, how their roles are going to evolve as the community agrees. Yes, we need to move down a low carbon path. What exactly is the role of the utility, and how are we going to use all of the brain power and the resources that exist in these utilities in Alberta to contribute towards these goals. And as far as information goes, I mean, it starts with our natural gas companies, our electricity companies. Right now, municipalities wanting to understand how energy is being used and where it's being used efficiently and perhaps not efficiently, so we can target and develop programs. I mean, the information is incredibly aggregate. It's incredibly, it needs to improve. I guess that's the bottom line. It needs to improve in a big way, and we've started those conversations in Alberta with 3 of our biggest utilities, and we're getting wonderful support for a better information system that would work not just for municipalities but for consumers right across the board. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next year. But I think there's a huge opportunity to raise the bar when it comes to information, and utilities are right in the middle of that.
Thank you all. Those are all very good points. I'm going to move on to the next question. So the question is, for a developer, what are some tangible benefits for building more energy efficient buildings and homes? The writer mentions he assumes that they're more expensive. Is there a benefit? Is the benefit recognition, sorry, yeah, I guess I think the question here is just kind of what is the value proposition for developers to build more energy efficiency buildings and homes?
Sure. Yeah, sir, I don't know how easy it is for you to do this, but if you can flip to my 5th slide. That's the slide that has the economic returns. The short answer to that question is that there are financial benefits. Yes, there is a premium to building energy efficient homes. It depends on how you build it. There are smart ways to do that and not very smart ways to do that. If you do the smart way, it's not going to cost more than a 3% premium. You can do up to 10, 15, 20% premiums, and the way that you build has everything to do with that. Who captures that premium, we find, is driven by a number of different things, and honestly, one of the biggest ones is risk aversion. I have many clients who are very comfortable building more efficient, but as soon as you try to introduce something like a solar panel, they know they have to deal with Ontario's regulators, and that's scary. First and foremost, it's going to mess up their closing date because they have no idea when they're going to get a contract or when they're going to get approved, and they can't afford to do that. The home buyers are going to need their closing dates to be a known item that they can plan for. So rule number one right out of the gate, anybody who can't play game in a fixed schedule is not going to play. So they don't talk about solar on homes with Ontario's regulators. What we've been able to do instead is put that in a metering environment or in a micro-utility environment where we can connect, but it means we're not using the feed-in tariff program. And the return numbers you see on this slide are without Ontario's feed-in tariffs. These are net metered numbers. So we've managed to achieve something there, but that's there's two lessons to learn there. One is that the efficiency does pay, and it pays in lots of ways. It pays in quality, it pays in comfort, it pays in the house is quieter. If you're talking about attached units, you're not going to be able to smell the stir fry next door. There's a whole list of soft benefits and hard benefits. All of those things you can't smell or hear are also echoes of the fact that you don't have energy leaking through the same places. So the payback is very strong. But the payback exists in a context, and the context is sometimes tricky. If you're building in a condo environment, you're going to have a different financial model than you are if you're talking about freehold homes, and rental is different again. So the bigger question is not the payback. We've found that everybody seems to be fairly comfortable with the idea that there is a payback. The bigger question is when it breaks and who's going to maintain that. And if the builder is not comfortable with the technology, even if it's completely proven technology, if the builder is not comfortable with it and they don't know how to get their heads wrapped around it, then they would rather not deal with it. They would rather not have to train their team or their contractors to go and maintain these things. They'd rather just do the stuff they know is safe and is going to work. So that's where the micro-utility has also been strong, because we can bring in partners who are experts at maintaining whatever new equipment is deemed desirable for that project. So I would say it's not a financial problem anymore. There's a business model problem, and there are some social and marketing challenges there, but it's not a financial problem. We can actually, with the micro-utility, we can sell you a house that is cheaper than a normal market rate house, and that is a net zero energy house. And you're going to pay the same or less for your energy bills too. I mean, the financing is just, it's pretty incredible, and really there's no reason not to do this, except for all the market inertia that we're learning and growing through. So hope that answers the question.
Thanks so much. That's great. Jim or Stephanie, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Derek nailed it.
Yeah, agreed.
Likewise, yeah.
Okay, okay. Thanks so much. I see another question here, and it's directed to Jim. So Cora Hallsworth has asked if the city would consider increasingly aggressive targets given the government of Alberta's announcement last November.
Sorry, could you say that a little slower? It's a little garbled.
Sorry about that. So she had asked if the city would consider more aggressive targets, greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, given the support indicated by the province of Alberta.
Well, yes. It's always been our intention that we're starting with some fairly conservative, doable standards, and it is our intention to demonstrate our success to City Council, build on that success, and ratchet up those targets as we build support and confidence with our City Council. In terms of community scale programs, of course, it was our assumption that significant dollars will be needed in our community for that to happen, and we estimate $60 million a year in incentive funding for 10 different programs that we modeled, and they all have wonderful benefit cost ratios, and the assumption in that is that other orders of government need to be part of this this formula. So to the extent that our success is going to depend on the ability of our provincial government to come through with matching dollars, in sort of the 2019-20 time frame. If we're going to, if our vision of community programs is going to take hold, and the messaging from the province is that is exactly where they're going as well. So again, it's just simply a matter of they're drinking from the hose these days, putting so many things in place, and the design of community scale programs such as the ones that we've modeled are probably a year off before we actually know the details about those.
Thanks, Jim. I see one more comment here from Judith, a bit of a follow-up to the question that was asked previously. So Judith has asked if there's an opportunity to, if there's a network that can be linked to this discussion, just to kind of continue the conversation, I presume. So Judith, there's a lot of ways we can continue this conversation. And I think this is a good transition to wrapping up the webinar. So through the Getting to Implementation initiative, we have a number of exciting things coming up in 2016. We're going to be releasing a community energy implementation framework that talks about how to operationalize some of the things that we covered today, and it looks more in depth about how to implement community energy plans and projects, including renewable energy projects, which you asked specifically about. So I encourage you to sign up to our newsletter on the website. The three organizations leading this project, the Community Energy Planning Getting to Implementation in Canada Initiative, Community Energy Association, Quest, and Sustainable Prosperity also all have opportunities to stay engaged. So would love to connect with you and anyone else interested offline after this workshop to talk more about how we can continue the conversation going forward. So again, it looks like my colleague Cheryl posted the link to the website in the chat box. It's gettingtoimplementation.ca. So I, again, encourage everybody to visit the website and sign up for our newsletter. I see a whole bunch of other kind of conversations going on here in the chat box. Are there any other specific questions for the speakers before we move to wrapping up? I'm not seeing any movement. So I think with that said, I'd like to again thank our speakers for their time today to contributing to this dialogue, talking about the value proposition for community energy planning. A number of people have asked if the webinar will be posted online. It will. The recording and the presentations will be posted, and we will send out an email with all of that information after the webinar. So thanks again, everyone, for your time. Thanks to the speakers for all the great information and examples they shared. And again, encourage you to visit our website, sign up for our newsletter to stay engaged in our activities through the rest of 2016. Thanks so much.